Oh yeah, I hope you will learn something new today. Yeah, so we'll dive into the top layer. We'll talk about dialogs, popovers, and modals. And yeah, let's get started. So I first want to take you back, a little bit back in history, where the web used to be flat, no dynamic stuff, no fancy features, dynamic loading of all kinds of data, layering. But today the web can overlap, and it does so a lot, with modals, for example, or popovers. And yeah, I brought a video as well. If my internet is strong enough, we can also watch it. Ooh. Well, let's try and connect to another network first. Yeah. So it's already quite an old video, about 4 years, but I think it's still something that can happen today, I would say. Let's watch it together and see if you guys notice something. Yeah. And I'm going to pause right here at the peak overlay, I would say. So, yeah, what did we see? So there was actually a blog behind all of the mess you saw on the screen. So, yeah, lots of ads, two banners, one to sign up to the platform and one, of course, the cookie banner. And then at the end, of course, the subscribe to my newsletter dialog, modal dialog, yeah, completely blocking us from continuing to interact or read the blog at all. So there are definitely ways not to do overlays, I would say. This is a great example. And I also brought another video. This is an interview by Lex Friedman, and he has DHH on, the creator of Ruby on Rails, and he talks about cookie banners.
The thing that really gets me about cookie banners too, it's not just the EU, it's the entire world. You can't hide from cookie banners anywhere on this planet. If you go to goddamn Mars on one of Elon's rockets and you try to access a web page, you will still see a cookie banner. No one in the universe is safe from this nonsense.
Probably the interface on the rocket.
Slower. You will have basically 150-second ping time, so it'll take you 45 seconds just to get through the cookie banners from Mars.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, there are definitely ways not to do cookie banners or overlays or stuff like that. Of course, due to EU legislation, the cookie banners are a known fact and are pretty awful feature of the web, I would say. But yeah, I will try to set you up for success today. Try to tell you the basics on overlays, especially focusing on dialogs and popovers and other models. My name is Tim Damen. I'm a front-end chapter lead at the ABN AMRO. I'm also accessibility lead there, web accessibility lead. On this picture, I'm next to the other web accessibility lead, and we're holding, very proudly, the successful WCAG 2.2 AA audit of the internet banking platform, which we are in the lead of. So yeah, very happy about that. I also advocate a lot for accessibility internally, but also externally, with talks and a podcast that I host, Focus Trap, talking about digital accessibility and web development. I'm a husband, a proud father of a daughter, and when I'm not behind the laptop, I like to be outside to do some sports and adventures. So today we will focus on the what, the why, and the how of content that overlays other content, overlaps it. Special focus on the dialog and the popover. let's start there with the dialog. Dialog is an HTML element. It's a native HTML element. It can be used to create modal dialogs and non-modal dialogs. And of course, we'll tell you the difference during my talk. And what is nice to know is that the dialog element is supported in all major browsers currently. Wasn't the case for a long time, between 2014 and 2022. Also, almost no one was using the dialog back then because it wasn't in all major browsers, and it wasn't really an accessible option. There were lots of accessibility bugs, so to say. Nice blog about it I've linked in this presentation, if you want to read up about that. It's a blog by Scott Ahora. And by the time 2022, the other browsers started to implement the dialog. That's also when they started to implement the dialog in the top layer, is when accessibility also improved. And today, it's actually, I would say, the better option for creating dialogs on the web. And then the popover. Popover is not an element, but an attribute. So it's an API in HTML that allows you to create popovers, tooltips, and other overlay content. And it's also supported in all major browsers. This is a little bit new, more of a new feature. So April last year, Safari was the last one to implement it, of Firefox, sorry. And accessibility was baked in from the start. So both the dialog and the popover are ready to be used. And this feature was proposed by the OpenUI group, which is a group that is, this is part of W3C. Oh. Yeah, so I brought some examples. This is an example of a non-modal dialog. You can see it on the bottom right. Why is this a non-modal dialog? Already getting into that a little bit. This is not blocking me from browsing the website. This is just there as extra information, and I can choose to not interact with it and still be on my way on finding my information that I would like to. Then a popover, for example, in Teams, when you try to start a new meeting, when you click the new meeting button, the popover pops up at the bottom of the button with a follow-up set of actions to start actually the meeting. Good example of the popover. And then we have the modal dialog. This is a modal dialog because it completely blocks me from interacting with the website underneath. It also has a backdrop, so I can also, the background is a little bit blurred, and I need to interact with this before I can continue. And personally, I don't like this implementation of this modal dialog because it's not really urgent. I don't have to interact with it in order to, go on my way on the website. So basically, this is a coupon code for me. Yeah, I think it's very important for the camping guys behind the website. But I don't like this kind of modal dialogues actually. And there's also a pop-up at the bottom right. Of course, the chat button. So I'll talk about the top layer as well. We'll be first talking about overlays and how overlays, how they used to be done and still are by utilizing the z-index. I think almost everyone knows it. Also, an example of how that works. So if you want to overlay stuff on the web, you can use the z-index CSS value, and if you want one element to be above of the other, you just add a higher z-index value to that one. And if you're lucky, then it will overlay, depending on which position you put the elements. Absolute or sticky can, for example, have also effect on whether or not you will be able to overlay it. And yeah, you can also get into like a z-index mess very quickly, I would say. If you have lots of elements, you might recognize this. we have lots of elements, and then somehow you end up adding like a value of 99999 to the C index. Yeah, I see some people nodding. Yeah, indeed. We have been there. So actually, the top layer is then here to help you, because the top layer is on top of all the Z indexes, like I will show in one of my later slides. Does someone know the maximum value of the Z index? Any guesses? No. This is the maximum value, this number. Can anyone pronounce this? No? I brought some help, sponsored by AI.
2,147,483,647.
This is the maximum Z index. So if you reach this number, you're at the end. You're out of luck. Yeah. So we'll keep it at 2 billion. And does someone know why this is the maximum value? No, I know it because I Googled it. It's the largest number because this is the largest number that can be stored in a 32-bit integer. The more you know. Yeah, the top layer was in the title of my talk. So this is how the top layer is visualized in the Chrome DevTools. It's been there for like about 2 years, I think. But before it was visualized in the Chrome DevTools, the top layer existed already, but it wasn't visualized. More about it later. So the top layer, I already said it, it's above everything else. So you have your main document. Now you can overlay it with Z index, and on top of all the Z indexes is the top layer, basically. This is an extra visualization. So if your main document with your semantic HTML, like footer, main, header, nav, aside, and then you can add overlays, like an overlay drop-down tooltip with Z index. And then on top of that, you have the top layer. That's where some dialogs go. Popovers, all the popovers go there. And there's this other thing that I didn't talk about yet. Request full screen. Who knows what that is? We all have used it. I know for sure. It's the JavaScript API that's called when you maximize your YouTube video. So when you click on maximize, you call the request full screen JavaScript API, and your video gets transferred to the top layer and maximizes. So next time when you maximize your YouTube video, open the DevTools, go to the top layer, and you will see that your video is in the top layer. And that's actually why the top layer was invented also. So before dialog and popovers went there, the top layer existed for this reason, to maximize videos. And it was invented, it started with some guy at Opera in 2007. And then I will show the history about it in my last slide. And then over time, all the browsers implemented this idea. So I talked about how stacking is done with Z-index. Basically, if you have a Z-index 1 and you have a Z-index 3, the one with the 3 will be higher. But in the top layer, you also have stacking. There can be multiple items at once today. And the stacking there is done with something called the philo stacking, first in, last out. Again, a visualization sponsored by AI. Basically works like this. If I add a dialog, for example, first, and then I add a popover, when it's time to remove stuff, first the popover goes, then the dialog goes. That's how philo stacking works. All right, let's do a little bit more of a deep dive. First, the dialog. Dialog, already talked about it. It's an additional window that temporarily overlaps the main content of the web page. And it typically contains information, a task, or an action. And this is how you open a dialog with JavaScript. You have two ways of opening it. One is called one with the show method, and one is show modal method. You might already guessed it. Show modal opens the dialog as a modal, and show opens the dialog as a non-modal. And these are some default features that you get when you use the dialog HTML element. You get a default role of dialog. which is used to, for example, this is used in the accessibility tree of the browser. And the accessibility tree is used by assistive technology like voiceover and voice command. So these types of technologies knows what elements are on the screen. So if they see a row of dialogue, then they know, oh, this is a dialogue. Let me try to act as if this is a dialogue and pronounce it as a dialogue and that kind of stuff. So this is automatically added for you. You have the option to show it as a modal or non-modal. So you can open and close it, like an open and close mechanism that you get for free without any JavaScript implementation you have to do yourself. If you open it as a modal, then you also get the escape to close, and you get a focus trap. And then later on, I will also showcase the focus trap and the escape button. And I will do that right now, actually. Let me see, open this. So we'll use my keyboard, and if it's right, yeah, you can also see what I'm doing. Use my keyboard to navigate, to test some accessibility features already. You can see the focus ring on the focused element. When I hit the tab button, I go forward. When I hit shift tab, I go backward. And you can open a dialog by, well, in this case, this is a button. So I can open it by hitting enter, for example. And then the dialog opens. And this is a non-modal dialog. This is an example of non-modal dialog. It's kind of similar of what I showed already earlier. And what is nice that you notice, oh, I cannot close it with escape. I need to close it with the button. What do we notice? So when I open this, this is an implementation with the semantic dialog element. When the dialog is open, the first interactable element is focused automatically. That's a feature that you get for free when you use the dialog element as well. And this is good for accessibility, because then the button that opens this dialog transfers you to the new context that is added to the screen. It's automatically focused, and you can directly close it as well, because the first interactable element is the close button. And then you can go to the next in-line interactable elements, which are the buttons. And then I have an example of what I think is a correct implementation of a non-modal dialog. It's a session extender. So I work for a bank. You have security rules. And when users are not interacting with the application for a long time, about 15 minutes, then we prompt them with a session extender model, like this one. And it counts down to 0. When 0 is hit, you will be logged out. But between these 2 minutes, you still have the chance to extend your session. And I think this is a good implementation of a modal dialog, because you basically have to interact with it. This is very important, because otherwise you would just get logged out if you ignore this. So also you can see now that there is a backdrop, which is also a default feature of the dialog element of the top layer. Of course, my focus is set on the first interactable element, which is the button. So we have a backdrop, a focus is set, and we have a focus trap. Works like this. I cannot go outside with my focus back to the other elements that are behind the dialog. And this is handy with a modal dialog, because you have to stay focused inside of it, because there's a backdrop, and you cannot go behind the dialog, basically. If you go behind it, you might not see the focus ring anymore. So if I were to be able to focus the second button out of the white screen, then I might not see it, because it would be completely behind the dialog. That's why the focus trap is important. All right. I have another good example, I think, of a modal dialog. That's the unsafe changes one. So if you could try to close a Chrome tab or a browser tab, or with some kind of unsafe changes inside of it, it's good to prompt the user. Otherwise, they will lose all of their progress, probably. I think also a good implementation of a modal dialog. The backdrop, I already talked about it. It's also a default feature of the top layer. So when the dialog, for example, is added to the top layer, you have access to a pseudo CSS element called backdrop, and you can style it with CSS depending on your liking. So you can make it really blurry, for example, or completely black, whatever you would like. And then we go on to the popover. Popover is relatively new, and it's a floating overlay that provides information or an action when triggered, appearing above the main content. Some guy named Tim said, a popover pops. So what do I mean by that? It pops up, and it pops up close to the element that you clicked or interacted with. That's what I think a popover should do. It's also in the name. And the popover is an attribute, so you can add it to any element on the web. So to a div, for example, but also to a dialog. And you might want to do this because a popover does not get a role automatically, so it inherits the role of its parent. So if, for example, in the second example, I use it on the dialog, then my popover would get the role dialog. And with popover, you get a set of other default features like light dismiss, which I will showcase in a later slide. You get keyboard behavior, escape to close. The popovers are added. All popovers are added to the top layer. And popovers usually close when other popovers are opened. That's what you get when you use the default auto setting. Let's look at an implementation. So I have a button and I have a div. And to make this a popover, we do this. So the div becomes a popover. It's connected to the button. To the button are two extra attributes added to open the popover. And this is all with just HTML, no JavaScript required to do this. And I will open it again with my keyboard, clicking enter. Let's see what I'm doing. Yeah, I open it. This is how it looks like. And what's nice, with an extra feature, for example, so I've added a link inside this popover. So when I open it and I hit tab again, I get transferred to the popover and not to any other interactable element on the screen, which is nice because this new context that's added to the screen is next in line for the keyboard navigation, which is, I think, how it should be. It's an extra feature you get for free as well. And then you can also open, of course, the popover with JavaScript by using popovers, show popover. So now I've added two buttons. One opens the popover, no worries, and the other one as well. What you might have noticed is that the popover is added to the middle of the screen. That's not because I styled it that way. That's the default. That's the default setting, basically, the default CSS values. And because it's added to the top layer and nothing else at this time is in the top layer, it's actually very easy to center it. Centering a div is actually quite easy if nothing is around it. It's centered because the margin is set to auto. It's styled this way by default, which is not really to my liking, because like I said, I'd like my popovers to be around where I clicked the button, for example. But these are the default CSS values. You can, of course, try to position the popover differently, but it's still a little bit hard because there's not really a good connection between the top layer and between your main document. So the top layer is something else, and then you have your main document, and there's not really a good connection yet. You can overcome this by using a JavaScript library like floating UI or CSS Anchor. But CSS Anchor is not supported in all browsers yet. But I brought an example of how that would work. So you can see, focusing the button now, when I hit enter, the popover is added at the bottom, which is more to my liking. How this is done, with this CSS, we have an anchor name at the, assigned to the button, question mark, and then you have the tooltip, which is the popover, tooltip as the ID, which is styled, and position anchor, same name as the anchor name. And you have some extra CSS values that make it actually stick to the button. And what is nice is that, for example, if I could reorder the page, make it smaller, for example, then the popover would also go to where space is left. So if there's no space anymore at the button, then it will automatically pop to the button if I were to style it like that, which I think is a very nice feature. It used to be done all by JavaScript and by complex JavaScript. So this can all be CSS in the future, which I think is very nice. And then I have some examples as well for a popover implementation. For example, these kinds of messages. Maybe a nice idea for the future. So a little bit of an overview. We talked about dialogs, of course, and popovers, and non-modal dialogs, and modal dialogs. To put it into perspective, the non-modal dialog and the modal dialog have explicit dismiss, and the popover has light dismiss. I forgot to show it, but it basically light dismiss is when you, for example, now click away, then it closes. Yeah? That's different than with the dialog. If I click away by default, the dialog doesn't close. The popover closes by default when you click away. That's light dismiss. Then the non-modal dialog is not added to the top layer, but you basically are on your own and you need to overlay it with C-index. The modal dialog is always added to the top layer, as is all of the popovers. So the non-modal dialog again is opened when you use the show method, and the dialog is opened when you do show modal. Then the non-modal does not have a default backdrop. The other ones do. And by the popover, if you use a backdrop on the popover, then you might want to make it a dialog, I would say. So yeah, please consider that if you're adding a backdrop to a popover. And of course, they all have keyboard assistance, where the modal dialog also has focus trap by default. A little bit of an overview, one of my last slides. So how stacking used to be done from 89 with C-index, the year I was born. Then, during this time, there was a conflict at the 99999 value, basically clashing with each other. Origin of the top layer, I already talked about this. So in 2007, some guy at Opera looked for a way to maximize videos, and then all of the browsers, they had their own implementation. So you basically had to try 4 different methods on an element during that time to be able to maximize something. So all the browsers had their own method name, their own name inside of their method in their own browser, which was nice, except Chrome. And Chrome actually at the end won. So now it's just request full screen, but back then it used to be different. So Chrome in 2014 added the dialog element. Not added to the top layer back then. Still lots of accessibility problems. 2002 added to the top layer. Use it by use show modal. The OpenAI group came in with the popover API, started developing it in 2020, and is now implemented in all major browsers, Chrome, then Safari, and now the top layer is mainstream, I would say. That was it. Thank you for listening. Yeah, if you like to stay in touch, you can scan the QR to go to my LinkedIn. I will also be around all day, so you can talk to me if you like. And yeah, thanks. Not sure how I'm doing with the time, but I think it was quite fast, right?
Yeah, we have a few minutes left for some questions.
Cool.
If anyone in the audience has any questions. So
Yeah.
Does this, using this, does this kind of make using something like Google CDK, which has, dialogs and models, is that kind of, is this preferable to use this rather than something like the CDK?
CDK, like is it like a design system?
No, it's like with material, I'm using Angular, so with
Mhm,
material,
okay.
you have this, in the background you have CDK and it provides modal service and, dialogue.
Yeah. It depends on the situation, I would say. This is. Oh yeah. So. Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Yeah, I asked you to remind me. So yeah, the question was, I think, if I understand correctly, is this a preferred option over like the Google SDK? Like I think it's something like a design system, right? I would say it depends on the context, what your implementation is. This is always the most closest to the semantic way of doing it. So I would say this is preferred if you really care much about, for example, accessibility. Then you have lots of great default options, less abstraction away from the actual stuff underneath. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I can answer this question about the same problem in your project. And what we did was we created our own service that used dialog. You have full control how it works, and the same semantics and accessibility features. You still have like modal service .open and all that. Yes. Okay.
If you have the same problem, Guy, I think that's a nice implementation. Thank you. Yeah, down there. How does it work on mobile? Yeah, it's also available on all the mobile browsers, so it works, as expected, I would say, as you style it and configure it. Yeah, then you will run into trouble if you add a popover, open it only on when you hover stuff. Then you run into problems because that's a little bit harder on mobile and is also harder for people that only use keyboard to navigate, for example. Then I would bind the opening of a popover always to clicking something like a button. Yeah. Another one? Yeah.
You talked about non-modal dialogs, and they don't include focus trapping. So would that mean that you're moved automatically into the modal, but when you keep tapping, you are moved back onto the page?
Yeah, so I will repeat. Question: if you use the non-modal dialog, you will not get a default focus trap. So if you keep tapping, then you will end up underneath. If we have time, I can also go back to that slide to showcase it. So this is the example I showed. If I keep tapping, then you don't see my focus ring right now, but I guess it's underneath here. There are lots of buttons. You can see I'm going to them one by one, and then I go back to the dialog. Yeah, so that's what happens where you don't have a focus trap. Good question, because I didn't show this. Yeah, so if you use the show modal method, then you get the focus trap for free and yeah, with all the benefits. All right, great. Yeah, another one. Yeah. Yeah. For example, this difference I made here, I would always create such a feature that is not the difference. The difference making in these kinds of cases, is it really urgent and is it needed for the user to interact with the model to continue with what he or she is doing? Then I would make it a model. If it's not as important, I would make it a non-model. Yeah.
Tooltips are good for non-models.
Yeah, as well. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, and have a wonderful day.